Welcome to Testimony Mountain. I so enjoy being with Veronica Swift today. And I always like our discussions and conversations and where the Lord leads us. It's a lot of fun. And so, Veronica, if you don't mind just sharing for anyone new how they can get connected with you.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here with you again today. I enjoy our conversations too. And other people do as well, which is even better. So I'm a researcher and a writer, and I'm interested in the whole genre of I'll call it the occult, but it's really the worldwide machinery that's basically trying to ruin everybody's life. That's how I think of it. That's how I came into it and why I got interested in it, because I'm sick of seeing other people's lives ruined and having my own life ruined by what they do. So I've gotten interested in how they operate, and I started a blog in 2021, and I've continued it on my own website, veronicaswift.blog, blog. And it's a subscription website because a lot of people don't like that I'm releasing the information that I am. So it's fairly inexpensive, but you do have to sign up. And I have 343 official blogs, a bunch of unofficial hidden blogs that you can find if you really scramble around, and over 1,000 references. So what I do is not an opinion. It's what I find from other people's experiences. And so I cite those experiences and give you the references to go look it up yourself, because you don't have to take my opinion for it. And so that's where I'm at most of the time. You could also find me grudgingly on Twitter, and sometimes on Gab, and oftentimes on my own locals website where we chat about things that can't go into an entire blog post. So that's veronicaswift.locals.com. So that's where I am.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I, again, so appreciate what you do, because it's that consolidation of a lot of different people's information, survivors' accounts into one place, which makes it a whole lot easier to kind of process through some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, if I didn't have to, sit down and rest in between, I like to garden, so I'm outside, but I don't like the heat, so I'm often sweaty. So I do a lot of gardening, and then I come in and I quote unquote rest by researching, and I sit in front of a fan in front of my computer trying to recover from digging rocks and dirt and all that stuff. And so that's what gives me the time to do this. But a lot of people don't have the time to do it, and I can appreciate that, especially seeing how long it's taken me, and so how many hours it's taken me to go from zero knowledge basically to really, hopefully, at least getting beyond a basic beginner's understanding of what might be going on. There's so much more to learn, so much more to find out, that I'm glad other people don't have to do what I've done, because we can't all spend our entire lives trying to come up to speed on this. It's not reasonable.
Yeah, it's such a blessing. And we were talking earlier about looking at denial programming, because that is, I think, one of the biggest ways that the occult tries to keep, normal people from knowing about it, because survivors are so programmed and shut down with denial programming. And so we'll start there and kind of see where we go.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to be interested in denial programming, and I have seen that term not very many places. I think I wrote in the blog that I've only seen 4 people so far in all the references I've ever pulled together actually say denial programming. Now, there's a lot of other survivors, as I go through their books and read their information, they don't say it specifically as that, but there seems to be a general thing that happens during programming in the occult, where they will do just about anything to cause or try to cause people to forget what has been done to them. And I actually ran across this just recently reading Wendy Hoffman's second book, White Witch in a Black Robe. She talks a lot about that in that book, and also in her first memoir, what is it? The Enslaved Queen, I think. So she doesn't term it denial programming, but if you want to have a horrendous idea of what happens to someone who is severely abused and then severely abused again so that they will forget the first abuse, that she's a good reference to go to. I mean, the things that happened to her were just incredibly horrific.
Yeah.
Her whole entire life, and they would then come back and do a lot of electroshock. She had a lot of electroshock done to her, bands around her head, and they would shock her brain or other parts of her body to and repeat words over and over again that she's going to forget what happened. She's not going to remember. If she forgets, XYZ would happen to her. And that seems to be fairly common. A lot of people have said they do a lot of work to make sure you don't remember.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate her stories. She's not coming from a Christian aspect, just for those who may be interested, but also the books that she's done in cooperation with her therapist, Allison, can't remember her last name, and
Miller.
and then ones that Allison Miller has written are really good resources. Don't agree with everything, and again, they're not coming from a Christian perspective, but I think, if you want kind of that broad perspective, it's a lot of material.
Trying to so that that's a whole other ball of wax. Therapists. So Allison Miller's a therapist in Canada, or was a therapist in Canada. I think she had to either give up her license or it was taken away from her because she was doing exactly this kind of work, trying to help Wendy and probably others remember what happened to them. From what I understand, and I could be wrong, but from what I understand, you have to have a hold of your memories to not have your body hold those memories. So your body can hold those memories, or your conscious mind can hold those memories. And when your body holds the memories, it's an unconscious thing. You can have your legs go numb. You can have your body not work right. Parts of your body will have pain that you can't, that it's idiopathic. They can't figure out where it comes from. You can have sharp pain. And Wendy does a great job of describing these kinds of things in her book. How she would go and they would say, well, there's nothing wrong with your teeth, and there's nothing wrong with this part of your body, and there's nothing wrong with that part of your body. But the body tends to hold the pain. It tends to hold the memory if your conscious mind doesn't. And it's going to remind you of that periodically until those memories come back into your consciousness, and you can then process through them. And that's the hard part for a lot of people, I think, processing the thought of, once you go through processing a severely traumatic memory, you don't want to ever go back and do it again.
Yeah.
Because it's not fun. And it's like reliving it for a lot of people, unless you have a really good coach or therapist that can help you through that, where you don't have to relive it. And that, I've had people say to me, well, but, does this work? Does that work? There are techniques and there's ways of not having to go through reliving really traumatic memories so that it hits you with the same force. So it's not as terrifying as it could have been, but you've got to go through that. You've got to process those. Your brain has to process those memories. They have to come into your consciousness in some form or another for your body to stop expressing them. And then once you're consciously aware of them, then your body can heal. But that's the whole point for the Brotherhood or the Cabal or the Jesuits or whatever group is doing this kind of programming, is that they don't want you to remember.
Yeah.
Ever.
Bottom line. And I would just say that I shared a little Testimony Mountain a couple of weeks ago, tips for survivors, where I talk about that, is that, to me, particularly as a Christian, the way to go through this as painlessly as possible, facing our pain as gently as possible, is building this foundation with the true family, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and being reparented by them, and being in healthy, safe community. I am so grateful that the Lord did not surface my memories, 10, 20 years ago. I wish I could be further along the process, but at the same time, when this is built, then the process is faster. We understand the processes of our brain going through and how to return to joy from distressing emotions. And so that's part of what we teach in transformations, and has been such a powerful, for me and for so many others. And so, there's ways to bypass, some people use hypnosis and things like that. I don't personally agree with that,
Mhm.
because part of it too is, the God who created us knows exactly how and when to bring up the memories in a way that I can handle.
Yeah.
And as I surrender the process to them, they are able to do it in such a beautiful way, and not always a way that I, would do it. And so, as I work with clients, that's one of the main things is, I'm not here with all the solutions, because I don't know the depths of the person. I don't know the uniqueness of their programming or anything.
Yeah.
But I get to come alongside and partner with true Lord Jesus. And the things that happen, are amazing. Um, is it still difficult? Absolutely. It's hard to face our pain. We run from pain, and that's part of, we have all these coping mechanisms, and that we build, to try to get out of pain. But it's facing pain, in the light of unconditional love that is the most healing. And I like, to, you know listen to or read, near death experiences. And oftentimes there's two components in there where they feel this powerful unconditional love, and they often have a life review of the things that were done to them and the things that they did to others.
Yeah.
But they didn't feel, overwhelmed with guilt and condemnation and shame because of being in that unconditional love. And to me, that's kind of the way we can walk through this journey, um, to not be overwhelmed. So I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah.
but that makes it a lot easier.
It does. It does make sense. And unfortunately, in kind of a traditional licensed therapy setup, they're prohibited, as I understand it anyway. I'm not a therapist, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but as I understand it, they're prohibited from bringing Jesus or bringing any kind of religious sounding or religious um, practice into therapy, which is, you have to imagine that that was probably set up that way
Mhm.
specifically to prevent people who have been programmed from healing completely.
Yeah.
Because for many, many people, I don't think it's true for everybody, but for many, many people, that's a requirement.
Yeah.
Having, yeah,
I
go ahead.
appreciated, a recent blog that you just put out and talking about a lot of survivors just moving to the light side of the system. And I think unless you have that, a powerful connection with the true Lord Jesus, it is easy to believe, oh, I'm coming out. This is, you know, and it's light side of the system. And
Yeah.
a lot of Christians can be stuck there too and think that they're out,
Yeah.
but maybe still operating in those means.
Yeah, it's been kind of a shock for me to expand as I've expanded, I try to learn another survivor's story on a regular basis because there are so many of them that and it's hard. It's hard, if you start doing this, if you start reading people's books, if you read Wendy's books. I don't recommend even starting with Wendy
Yeah.
Hoffman's books because they're kind of like you need to get through sort of easier stuff to read before you read
Yes.
that. Um, but so in trying to do that and trying to learn, because everybody's story is different, everybody's got a different part of the equation. That's part of the beauty, in a sense, of the brotherhood, is that they divide things up so well that until you get many, many stories under your belt, you don't see it as a whole picture. You can see it just as a chunk or a
Yeah.
slice of something that really doesn't make sense. Once you put them all together, you're like, everybody has a slightly different experience, but they're all so similar that it's this one group just trying to make it all look different.
Yeah.
But yeah, the I forgot what I was going to say. I went off on a tangent and then I forgot where I was going. Hmm.
With the denial program, I was just going to share a little bit. My own experience with that is, even though I'm a fair ways, into this journey, I would say that it is something that comes up probably every week in my sessions with my prayer minister, as well as in all of my journaling during the week. And, as
Yeah.
things are surfacing, there's just that, how can this be? This is crazy. And,
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels so strongly. It's like those memories are like somebody else's. They feel like they're far away. And the temptation to
Yeah.
go, I have a pretty good life. And, this thing, if I go deeper into this, it could get a lot worse. And so
Right.
there is that constant voices from parts of us that have been programmed to keep us from, going down that road, or, the specific denial programming. And there's different variations. There's denial programming, there's the crazy programming,
Yeah.
unbelief programming, and so it can manifest in little different variations that keep coming.
Yeah.
But I'm getting to where, when I'm journaling with the Lord, and I'll go, this is crazy. How can this be? And the Lord's just
Right.
like, you can believe that if you want to, or you can recognize its source, and so it's
Yeah.
becoming easier to go, okay, I know this is programming. And
Right.
even with my prayer minister, sometimes I just feel compelled to go, am I crazy? Is this dumb? This feels dumb. And
Yeah.
it's like, I just need someone to go, no, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
This lines up with, you know, the spectrum of, survivor stories. This isn't, way
Isn't
out
out of the ordinary. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the benefit too
there. Mhm.
for someone like yourself and the people that you work with, to have availability of other people's stories. You can read them and say, all right, this is, someone else has had this experience and it's not my exact experience. However, it's close enough in some ways that, boy, I'm wondering if, and in fact, I'm working with someone right now who approached me and said, how do you figure out if your family is in it? I don't think I am, but I'm pretty sure one of my family members is. And how do you find, so as an outsider, even, how do you put together enough clues? And there are clues. There are
Yes.
clues. And I don't know personally how many clues you have to build to make a solid case that an individual or a family is in the occult, but you can certainly piece them together and give yourself, a comfort level of saying, this is highly likely, or it's moderately likely, or I don't know, I don't think so. I don't see enough clues for that. So
Yeah.
they hide things so well. It's
Mhm.
not unless you have someone say, this is exactly the truth.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's difficult to know
Yeah.
what exactly is going on. And so many people are programmed that, in fact, virtually everybody in the occult is programmed because they don't want this information to come out. So you have to wind through all of the I'm crazies, and this is crazy, and this experience is crazy, and until you get to, well, but so many other people have, and a lot of people are telling me, and then you come out the other side with, yep.
Yes.
This is real. This is real, and it doesn't feel like a memory,
Mhm.
doesn't feel like it's me, doesn't look like, and then you just say, well, this is how the brain works. This is how they're getting away with it, because they are actually gaslighting all of us into thinking that uh, our imagination is something different. Sometimes it's, that it's never real. Our imagination is not always real, but sometimes it is a replaying of something real that's happened. And sometimes our dreams are
Yes.
telling us information, and they don't feel real either half the time, but sometimes the information in them it leads down to a real experience. And and why would we not have these memories, until we hit a certain age? Well, they don't tell you that this is exactly how the human, as a teenager, your brain works differently than it did as a kid, than it did as an infant, than it does as an adult in certain stages of life. So, as an adult, when you hit the 30s, your brain starts to work differently. And for many people, these things start to come up, but they think, well, why did I not have this before? If I didn't have it before, how could it be real now? But it's just entering that different stage that that allows, allows your brain to work better together, and for the denial programming or the torture that releases, pushes those memories away to
Mhm.
surface.
Yes.
They've got so much control over it, and they've gaslit us into thinking that memories aren't real,
Yeah.
and it's that's a shame.
It is. It is. And that was what was helpful for me in my journey, is understanding better how the memory works, particularly with traumatic memory, and that it's stored differently in the brain than normal everyday memory,
Yeah.
and that it's actually usually encapsulated in a way that is less contaminated than our everyday narrative. The fish gets a little bigger and bigger each time we tell it, type of thing,
Yeah.
versus traumatic memory is stored in a way that, because we're not conscious of it, stays pretty intact, and is quite reliable. But I would say, like, I'm grateful that the Lord left clues for me all along.
Mm.
And he opened things up in a way that I was able to take it in bits and pieces. And so, I think I've mentioned before, there was a dream that I always had from childhood, and an incident, a memory that I remembered, that were definitely clues that I had no idea how it fit until, later, as the story, began to open up. And so, you know, and even when my memory started coming in, it was like, well, I couldn't believe that my family was part of it. And so this place of, we had a neighbor across the street between ages of 2 and 6 that later turned out to be a pedophile. So it was like, okay, I can see that during these ages I was exposed and programmed, and trafficked and so on. So I could handle that at that moment.
Yeah.
I couldn't handle at that moment that, it was a generational issue,
Yeah.
and so on, in the scope of it. And so the mercy of the Lord is to introduce these clues, as we can handle it.
Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful. So.
Yeah. I think, yeah, the bits and pieces is important. I've seen a lot of people say that journaling helps them a tremendous amount. And writing accesses different parts of your brain. I used to, my profession when I was still employed as a teacher was education, and I used to have to talk to students about the importance of taking notes by hand
Interesting. Yeah.
instead of doing it on their cell phones, because while I was still teaching, the shift from not having cell phones in the classroom to having cell phones in the classroom was still occurring. And what I saw was that people who went solely to cell phone use to take notes on, or whatever, their performances dipped tremendously. And it's because we store memory kinesthetically through our body. And so if you write, you can imprint your brain in a different way, and in a more profound way, than if you are touching the screen, even if you're doing what looks like writing on the screen. But if
Mhm.
you're typing, it doesn't encode in your memory the same way. So we can put memory, we put things in, like you're trying to learn something educationally, we put them in through our hands and through actual physical writing. But we can also bring them out
Mhm.
through actual physical writing. There's this connection between your hands and your brain that occurs. So journaling is really, even drawing as a journal. You can do an art journal. You can do a written journal. And I've seen people do, like collage or other kinds of art like that, but that doesn't seem to be as powerful as the actual physical hand writing is. So in terms of, accessing your own brain, if you're trying to do that, don't do it with cell phone. It doesn't work very well. But yeah, use your hands. You can use both hands. Even if you're right-handed, you can use your left hand, and that will access different portions of your brain than with your right hand.
And I totally agree with you. What I would just add to it is, do whatever you can get it out. And so I agree with you that handwritten is best. And I have done a fair amount of that. for me, because I'm such a fast typist and because things are flowing, it slows me down a lot to handwrite. And so most of my journaling I do on the computer, and um, it's a lot. And then I send it to my prayer minister, which helps us to keep in touch with what's going on. And so it is more convenient. Um, I have been, experimenting a little bit here and there with doing more handwritten.
Yeah.
Um, and, but some people, like if it's a barrier to you, and if there's a block, do something. And
Yeah.
so even if speaking it into a recorder is easier for you, if you don't like to type and you don't like to handwrite, whatever expression we can get out is good and helpful. And so each one of us have to find what that looks like for us. Brain science wise and all of that, handwriting definitely is best. And so it's encouraging for me to do it. It's just harder. My handwriting is so sloppy, I can hardly read it. But
I think it's best for if you're having trouble. I mean, if it's flowing and you can't get it out fast enough, then sure, absolutely type it. Do whatever works in that regard. But if you're struggling and you're trying to figure out how to connect with your own self, handwriting can help better than typing.
yes. Yes.
But I agree with you about the do whatever works. I had a friend once who, and we were working on similar issues at the same time, so we kind of connected based on that. But the success that I had with certain techniques, she absolutely made no progress with whatsoever.
Yeah.
And the success that she had with certain techniques, I could not make work for me for love nor money. I couldn't get it in. So we would talk about this a lot because she would say, oh, I tried this and I tried this variation of this and that variation. And I'm like, well, that's great. I'll try it too. No, nothing. Nah, none of it worked. And then I'm like, but you could try this. I tried this variation of what I'm doing. She's like, So we are all unique and individual, and yes, we do have to do what works. Sometimes we don't know what to start with, though.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And with that, a lot of people, it's just journaling, just writing down, whatever's coming. I highly recommend two-way journaling with the Lord. And with your parts. And so that's different. And if that is kind of new to you, Mark Verkler has some good material on hearing God's voice. Another great resource, I think it's called Joyful Journaling Joyful Journey by Dr. James Wilder. And the really cool benefit that I'm seeing, is part of, working with our brain and understanding how our brain works, which Dr. James Wilder is amazing with brain science. He calls himself a neurotheologian, which I love that terminology. And so, understanding the way we were created was to be in a state of joy. And that when we have distressing emotions, we know how to return to joy. And what I was discovering, and so for a lot of us from trauma, we don't know how to recover from it. And we're afraid to access the emotions because once we start, we may never end, and those types of things.
Yeah.
But when I'm journaling with the true family, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, it's one of those things where I can express some distressing emotions, and then I can hear them saying, we're here, we love you, that attunement. I see you, I hear you, I understand, I'm delighted to be with you, and I have solutions, which is what, is the deepest need we all have, not just survivors. And so with that, and, then I can settle down and I can find that safe place. And then, something else pops up and, just this distressing emotion, and I can be quieted in their love. And then when I review the journal, it's also helping me to cement that pattern in my mind, is that I can have distressing emotions, but there's a safe place and I can calm down and I can find joy again.
That's one of the things that's really lost with any kind of trauma, is the ability to self-soothe.
Yes.
So to bring yourself back to a physiologically calm spot. And when you get overwhelmed with memories of traumatic incidents that come flooding you with the feelings that also went along with them that you couldn't really deal with at that time. So now you got to deal with them, because if you don't deal with them, they just make your life miserable. But yes, coming back and having that self-soothing ability, a lot of people have lost. So that's a great take. There are a lot of techniques for that as well. That's a great technique to have. If you have God, if you have Jesus, if you have a loving heavenly family to come back to, that's a lot easier than it is not. That's for
Yes,
sure.
definitely. And, you brought up about memories coming through as dreams, and I'll just share this as an illustration, is a little while back, I had a dream, and so I try to get up right away and record it because they slip away so quickly if we don't.
Yeah.
And this one came in 4 parts. It was the first that it was this dramatic, of 4 different scenes from actually my cult life. And the first one was so interesting because, just as the dream itself wasn't that, whatever. But the processing with my parts and with Jesus revealed so much more information and, connected the dots and so on. And so in this dream, we had acquired a young woman, and we were in a school bus, and the main guy who had coordinated all this, he left, and this woman who we had gotten was driving the school bus, and I was in a back seat, and then there was another guy in the front seat, and it was just kind of that place of like, I thought the mission was done, so I was just kind of chilling out and not paying attention. And in the dream, I look up, and I realize that the girl has fallen asleep at the wheel. But yet I just kind of drift off like, oh, no big deal. And I feel this nudge again. And I know even in the dream, it's the Lord nudging me. And I kind of come to a little bit more and realize that we're headed straight for woods and a river and all kinds of things. So we're headed for a crash. And so I jump up, shake her awake, and she stops the school bus. So that's the portion of the dream. So when I went to the journaling, I journaled the dream, and then, I started off with just, is this a memory? Asking the Lord that. And I felt like there was a yes. And that at that point, he encouraged me to ask, parts of me to tell more about this. And so I asked them to, and they affirmed that it was a memory. And they began to kind of give pieces of the puzzle, and also with Jesus, that this was a setup. And the young woman was drugged. She was meant to fall asleep at the wheel. And I was drugged too. That's why I was kind of drowsy and not paying attention. And ultimately what they were wanting to do was test my theta skills of, in a crash situation, how would I use my theta skills to protect myself and, all that. And that the Lord nudged me awake and ruined their setup. And so, there were consequences of that I had to walk through. But, it was just a really one of the ways that God used to reveal this, and then for me to walk through that, memory, work through the emotions of it, and for me and my parts to see that God's more powerful than the cult.
Right.
That he could intervene and wake me up. And so
there are a lot of those stories. I see a lot of those stories occurring over and over and over again, that they try to do things, and then God either intervenes directly, or he intervenes through someone, and it messes everything up. So
yep. And so I hope that helps people to just go, oh, okay, that's one way that we can process our dreams. And the more we pay attention to our dreams, the more we're likely to gain those clues, in the right time and in the right way. And so sometimes I'll have a dream and the Lord will go, just put that on the shelf. We'll get to that later,
Right.
And so it's just a very hard and difficult, but beautiful journey when we walk it out with true Jesus.
I think the thing that is so hard when you're slogging through that really difficult time of one thing after another that makes you feel like crap.
Yeah.
realizing that it does come to an end and it's worth it at the end.
Yes. Yes.
So you're not there yet, maybe. I've been through my slog, trauma slog, and it's a different life at the end. It's a totally different life. And it's one where it's much more relaxing, first of all, because your body isn't constantly being yanked one way or another by these memories that it's trying to get you to pay attention to, and you really don't want to. I think denial it's kind of a universal human condition when it comes to trauma. We don't, our body doesn't want to remember it. And so even denial programming kind of, it works off of our natural human instinct. So it works with it. And that's probably one of the reasons why they use it. So we don't want to have to go back and relive those or rethink those. And the beautiful thing about getting to the end and working through it is that then you can remember that incident, but there's no emotion connected to it because emotion's been healed. So it's not an emotionally charged thing that makes your body go crazy and you stop being able to breathe and you can't function correctly. You can just think of it and say, okay, that was a really unfortunate time. Moving on. What are we having for dinner? Do you go back to being able to live real, your life without having everything stop around you so that you have to work through the next thing. But that is a period of time that most people, I think, go through. And the more trauma you have, the longer it generally takes, unless it doesn't take long. It's different for everybody.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is that the Lord's promise is sure that he works all things together for good. And so it's great when we can get the memory to neutral, but when we can even get it to where we can see points of restoration or possibilities of restoration, where we can actually have some delight in the Lord bringing restoration, not just of us, but potentially of others involved. And, that's one of my passions is I believe that as I process this, my memories, because, they're connected with other people who are also in the system, that there is a potential for healing and restoration for them as well, including our perpetrators. And so, that's what brings me joy and why I keep on this journey is not just for me, but for the ripple effect. And because, I believe part of my calling is to partner with the Lord in bringing this system down.
Yeah.
And so that's what keeps me going, because there's many times when I do get overwhelmed and I go, I'm done with this. I don't want to have any more memories. I don't, I'm just going to stay here. And
in the short run, it's easier. It takes a lot of energy to do what you're doing. I think for every person that comes out and speaks publicly like you are, there's 50 doing, the same work that you are without a community. Yeah. And there's 1,000 scared to even start, but they're watching. Yeah. They're watching and they're looking for, some reassurance that they can do this without their lives falling apart. So it is possible.
And I think, with the denial and unbelief and all of this kind of stuff, the hardest place is when we are in a community or family that doesn't believe us.
Yeah.
Because we're having a struggle enough to comprehend or, to accept it ourselves. And then when we're with, family members who go, that can't have happened. No, that, and so I am so grateful that I have a beautiful community who believe me and are walking me through this, but it's really painful because my family isn't able, to handle this.
Yeah.
And I understand, that it's too traumatic, it's too overwhelming, it doesn't make sense to them and all of that. But the best thing, if you are in relationship with a survivor, the best thing you can do is to just come alongside and say, I believe that you believe this, and I'm standing here with you.
Yep.
And I'm willing to walk this through because I believe that will heal in a much bigger way. And we can sort through details. Is it possible I don't have all the details right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I may not have the full picture and all of those kinds of things. But to be completely unbelieved and thought crazy, it's devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the lovely thing is that you don't have to have all the details to heal.
Yeah.
You don't have to know exactly what happened to heal. You don't have to, work through every single sordid detail.
Mhm.
There are paths to do, there are paths to make, because healing basically is the first step is to make sure you're not getting knocked off your keister every time you have a memory come up, right? So you want to be able to function in life without having this constant jarring effect of all of these unresolved um, traumatic memories being stored and not having the neurons work correctly in your brain. So, but you don't have to know all the details,
Yeah.
and that's the nice part. And you can really, at least for myself, when I was doing things, you can look at bits
Mhm.
and kind of tunnel vision and ignore the whole picture in some sense, and
Mhm.
those just connecting with those bits will help you, will help your brain heal
Yeah.
trauma. So
And then,
it's not that you have to relive it all. I think some people do think that, so
yeah.
that's important to mention.
And I believe that when we lay our healing journey in the hands of the Lord, He orchestrates it. He knows what we can handle, when we can handle it, and how much we need to go through. I'm aware that I can trigger myself by, just diving into all kinds of things, and I can have myself in a frenzy, in 5 minutes. Um, and so I
Yeah.
do have to be careful about, asking the Lord, is this okay to read at this time?
Right.
Should I wait? And I see that it's one of those things where as I submit to them, and some people don't like that word and get triggered by the word. So as I yield, if that's better,
Yeah.
to them, there's this place where just as I'm having a memory, the next portion of the book I read confirms exactly,
Yeah.
and
Right.
it's happened enough that I know they know the big picture. They know what I can handle, and I can rest in that instead
Yeah.
of the frenzy we get in to try to make sense or understand all of the details and all of that.
Yeah.
And when we have a lot of different things, like it helps to know how the system works in different ways.
Yeah.
I suspected that, my parents were not my real parents. Even as a child, I would have these fantasies of um, them dying in a car accident and being adopted by people who would really love me. And, they love me
Yeah.
the best of their ability and they took care of me well. It's not like
Right.
there
Yeah.
was obvious signs of abuse, but there was something deep inside that goes, this isn't real.
Yeah. Right.
And then one of the memories that surfaced was of um, being forced at approximately 4 years old in a ritual to kill my mom.
Mm.
And that was huge and a grieving thing. And then more recently, a memory of my birth mom and her being killed at my birth and me
Yeah.
feeling responsible and I couldn't save her and I wasn't good enough to save her and all this. And
Yeah.
so you can say, well, how can you have that many moms? Well, when you understand how the system works, how they adopt you in and out and different presentations,
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, these pieces can fit. If I
Yeah.
just looked at my life, from a normal, natural perspective, I would think I'm crazy. It's like,
Yeah.
how can you have that many moms? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of people. Well, yeah, I had someone talk with me about the whole drugging issue. That's something I haven't really delved into on the blog yet. I haven't, but I see it everywhere. So people get drugged to get taken to a ritual. They're drugged during the ritual. They're drugged after the ritual. They're drugged during programming. They're drugged just because, you know, they exist, essentially. There's a lot of drugging that goes on in the system. But if you understand that drugging occurs, you understand why a memory might be hazy. Because when you are drugged, that's how you're going to perceive reality. So haziness isn't because it didn't occur or because the memory isn't real. Haziness is because these people love drugs. The occult loves and uses drugs all the time, especially for memory wiping, especially for even just to make you sleep, so you don't know how long a travel to a ritual takes or which direction you're going, and you can't look out the window. So that those kinds of things are really, I think, helpful to know. You go, okay, well, all right. So in a real life where drugging doesn't occur, this wouldn't make any sense. But if I was drugged, then of course it's going to seem like there's no time at all, or of course it's going to impair my memory. Drugs designed to impair your memory do exist, according to survivors that I've read over and over again.
Absolutely. And virtual reality is another piece of the puzzle, and a variety of drugs. And, you know, I'm reading a book right now of someone who, you know, we typically think of the putting to sleep, memory wiping, all of those kinds of drugs, but actually a bliss type of drug, so that she would think that all of these things that they were doing that's horrible was good. And so that was a new one for me to hear from a survivor. And so with the drugs, it is this whole gamut from, you know, uppers, downers, you know, bliss, LSD,
seems like they've got more. I read a list once, and it's in one of Fritz Springmeier's and Cisco Wheeler's books, but I don't remember which one offhand. At least I think that is it. It could be a different one, but I'm pretty sure it's one of theirs. And she listed all the drugs that they were using when she was in the system, and the 60s, 70s, I think, were her main times, and it was just astonishing. There's page after page after page, and half of them are designer drugs, like specifically designed for the occult and for their use, and they're not even publicly available. So, and that was decades and decades ago. You can't imagine what they might have now. It's mind-boggling to think of what they can do.
Yeah, and there is a kind of resurgence with therapists, some therapists or some researchers, to use drugs as healing. And I personally am not comfortable with that, because I don't know, you know, if they're using similar drugs that were used in the programming, then, you know, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah, I think that the next topic that I'm tackling that kind of dovetails with the whole denial programming aspect is the fact that there are a significant number of therapists and people within the psychiatry, psychology, licensed clinical social worker, marriage and family therapy, the whole gamut of licensed therapists and people who do counseling with folks, even the pastoral counseling. There are a tremendous number of people who are not genuine, and they are there specifically to make sure that people do not heal. And there's a whole there's a whole kind of kerfuffle within the survivor community regarding this, because I think a lot of people don't realize the dramatic extent to which this is true. Like I wouldn't want to say that it's 50%, but I wouldn't be surprised, frankly, if the occult hadn't flooded the entire, therapy and certainly the medical aspects of the psychiatry with people who basically just don't believe that dissociation exists, and therefore dissociation is very rare, and so they're not going to treat it, or they're going to oops, I think I lost you. They're going to diagnose things as something different than what they are. So there is this giant infiltration of the therapy communities and of the medical communities. You can see that in Rebecca Brown's book, where she talks about the percentage of doctors and MDs and nurses and other support staff in hospitals, for example, who are actual occultists. It's a giant proportion. And so we can probably expand that into the therapy community as well. There are many good therapists. I'm certainly not saying that there aren't. And there are a lot of people who have come out of, so it's the wounded healer aspect. There are a lot of people who do work with deeply traumatized individuals who have been through it themselves. So that's good. But finding those people and finding availability with those individuals is usually pretty darn difficult.
It is.
And finding hospitals or other facilities is also very, very, very difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah. And at the same time, I don't want that to discourage people. I do believe that because we were created relational, that, we heal relationally in community, and that it is so key. And so the tendency to just isolate and try to figure it out on our own, to me, with this level of complex trauma, I don't think I could do it on my own. I know I couldn't. And so the encouragement is you cry out to the true Lord Jesus, and he will provide a way, and he will provide a safe path. And I am so grateful, for who I'm working with right now. It is a miracle. I think she's the best of the best. And, the Lord is good, and he will provide. So
he will, but you have to ask. And I find a lot of people don't ask, or I find when they do ask, they will outright, and I think this is part of denial, or maybe not programming for most people, but just kind of generalized denial, is that a lot of people don't deeply believe that there is a solution.
Yeah.
Like even I've talked to people about chronic pain. There are solutions for chronic pain. There are solutions, and I've given a number of people certain solutions, and I find over and over again that they will ignore them or forget about them, or they don't implement them because it's there's some part of ourselves that, for some people, that it's easier to be in the groove that you're already in than it is to jump the groove and get out of it and explore explore healing. But it's so much better. Being healed is so much better than not being healed. I encourage people to but you have to seek those answers. And then if people give them to you and they're outside of the mental box that you have to say to yourself, hey, maybe this would work, and I'm going to try it even if it doesn't work. If it's the first thing that disappoints me and I wind up doing an Edison 1,000 trial thing until I find the 1,000th thing that actually works for me, then do it, because we can have 1,000 solutions and none of them may work for you. But you have to, if you want it, you'll find it. If you ask God, it will cut down the trial from 1,000 to maybe 2. And if you listen to what God says, I remember when I was looking for help, and I got a list of individuals to look into, and I was drawn to one name, and I'm like, nope, not going to do that one.
But I totally agree with you, the importance of medical care for survivors, because a lot of times, the body takes, like we talked about earlier, is holding the memories, and most survivors have a lot of health issues, and it's hard to trust a doctor and all of those kinds of things. And so I'm really grateful to have a wonderful health coach that I work with. And she also is a survivor that's on her journey. But, she also understands about parts and is connected with true Jesus. And so she's furthering her education to minister specifically to survivors, because it's such a key need in this, is not just emotional health, but physical.
Completely lost you this time.
It's scary. because a lot of the traditional medical system is part of the system and all of that. And so I'm just
Yes.
grateful, believing we're working on building a community with different resources to address different needs that survivors have, because
That's
it's
good.
so needed out there.
Very, very needed, but beyond what anybody can probably imagine who hasn't seen the travails of folks whose body your body has to resolve the issues that it's holding inside its cells. If it doesn't resolve them, it will cause other physical illnesses to pop up, and ones that will be difficult to heal because it's not a true physical origin. It's an emotional trauma origin. So yeah, that's really, really important. It's really important. I'm glad you're doing that because it's a resource that I'm sure a lot of people will take advantage of once they know it's available.
Yes. And the other part of that too is that our parts, I believe, can actually cause physical symptoms as well. So when I'm with clients and, we start talking a certain direction, and they start having physical symptoms, we'll just stop and ask, what part is doing that and why, in a gentle and loving way, because they can act out, particularly pre-verbal parts that don't, express other ways. Or when we're ignoring our parts and not dealing with them, then it's like the only way they have to get our attention is through the body.
Yeah.
And so the more we can pay attention, work through these issues, the better.
Absolutely. So I just thought I'd mention, to kind of wrap up on the denial aspect, what I'm seeing in the online quote unquote survivor community is a lot of denial. And one of the things that was really helpful for me lately, because I've dealt with a lot of naysayers, some people call them harassers, some people they're just annoying. But many of them are working through their own issues and they're just unaware of what they're doing. I believe they're doing what they have been programmed to do or told to do. And their job essentially is to come after anybody who brings any of this information to light. So I can put that into perspective. But what really helped me was realizing that they are dealing with denial issues and societal denial. And you can recognize denial. When I look around in the survivor community, what I see are a lot of people who deny every aspect of a survivor's story. They put them all down. They are kind of vicious, and it's continuing. It continues for a much longer period of time than it would if someone just came across a survivor story and didn't like it or didn't think it was, most average people, not programmed, not from the occult, who come across someone's story who they don't believe, they may complain about it, but they certainly don't complain about it every day for years on end.
Yes.
I see that a lot. And there's a lot of what you could call black and white thinking, or what one survivor kind of called an absolute quality to what they say. And that helped me a lot when she said there's an absolute, firm, no question, unquestioning denial. Denial that this ever happened. Nothing like this could ever happen. It's all, there's the terminology, all, the nothing, the black and white thinking. That was flipped a switch for me. And I thought, okay, so this looks more like a denial programming issue than it does regular, average, everyday, well, I don't want to believe your story kind of denial. So if you see that firm, that absolute, none of this is true, none of it could ever be true, and you see it over and over and over and over again, I'm thinking that it's a possibility that someone like that is running out a sort of denial programming that's designed to be out in the community, that's designed to target survivors, that's designed to cut them down every story they've ever told. It's designed to just try to cut them off at the ankle. So that's what I see, not just for individuals dealing with their own parts who are in denial. And that's how you would this individual would have identified her own parts as that they were rigid and very firm, and there was absolutely, she said, they were unquestioning. There was never any brain, part of their brain, their, part of their speech that said, well, could be possible, maybe it's possible. There's no leeway at all. It was just very firm and fixed.
Yeah.
So I thought that was useful for me, because otherwise, a lot of what these people put out, the harasser types in the communities, it doesn't make sense in the long run. To do this every day for 4 years doesn't make sense. But and to never have any thought that any of it could possibly ever be true after 4 years of reading 50 stories about people, there's not a whole lot of brain involvement in that, or it's a form possibly of programming. So that helped me kind of relax about the people who really just go full force and say that all these survivors are full of crap, that it's not a reality thing, that it may be connected to this kind of denial programming.
That's really good. And so just encourage, if, any survivors out there are receiving that type of harassment, when you recognize it for what it is, it doesn't hurt quite as bad.
Yeah. The perspective is even for an onlooker like me. I mean, they come after me sometimes, but I'm not telling my story. They're going after people whose stories, you would have to, there's just no way. You'd have to be the most creative person in the universe to come up with the information that they've come out with. There's no way they could make that stuff up, in my opinion. But to these folks, it's all just a made up story, which I don't think is true.
No, I was talking to another survivor the other day, and he was like, this is the club nobody wants to be a part of.
Exactly. Why would you try to, and then you just have to try to remember all of that? Like a lifetime's worth of memories, of horrible memories? No way. Nobody wants to be part of that club. You aren't a part of it willingly, and you sure don't want to spend your entire life making up a story that's that awful.
Yes.
Okay. It's not funny. It's funny, but it's not funny because it's so ridiculous. It's a kind of an involuntary laugh. Sorry about that.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being on and just sharing. And just want to encourage those who are watching to share, spread this around. We want more and more people to be able to know that there is a way through this, and to be aware of the denial programming, how to help others who are survivors, as well as if you're a survivor yourself. And you might feel in that place where, this is so crazy, it can't be.
Right.
To just know that there's a good possibility it is, and that we stand with you, and there is a way through. So thank you so much for being on. And
you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I'll say too that, if you don't want to put your story out to the entire world, you can contact me and say, I've got a story I want to put out behind the safety of the paywall for other people who are supportive. And we can do that as well. You can start small. You don't have to, you don't have to use your name or any kind of information that would identify you. But sometimes just getting it out there, even if it's for just a few eyes, can be a really freeing and a way to move along or start. And every single person who is desperately searching for parts of their story to be mirrored, or that they recognize it in someone else's story, will be glad you did.
Yes. Thank you so much, Veronica. And we will see you all next time on Testimony Mountain.